Welcome to another episode of the Fenway Rundown. I'm your usual co-host, Sean McAdam, without my regular co-host, Chris Cotillo, who's taking some time off over the next week and a half. But we are ably represented here with another member of our coverage team, with Chris Smith. We'll be talking a lot about the Red Sox minor league system, a subject Chris knows a great deal about and does a terrific job keeping track of for us on MassLIve.com. Before we get into the show, we want to remind you about the Red Sox Insider Text program, which offers all kinds of updates throughout the day, breaking news, lineups as they're posted, the ability to ask us questions, and of course, supply questions going forward for any future mailbag episodes of the Fenway Rundown. And to join up, all you need to do is text the word join to 617-751-6257. Then click the link. That will give you a free 14-day trial period. After that, it's $4.99 a month. With that, let's welcome in Chris Smith and get an overview on what's going on in the Red Sox minor league system. Chris, obviously an interesting time, particularly at the AAA level, where not only do we now have the big three, by which, of course, I mean Marcelo Meyer, who is on the IL, at least temporarily, Roman Anthony and Kyle Teal, but joined shortly thereafter by Christian Campbell, turning this into the big four. Let's talk about the elevation of the big three together. Did that surprise you that the Red Sox sort of kept them together and moved them up as a trio? And what do you think is behind such a move rather than moving guys up individually? Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was a little surprised that they moved them up all together. I could have seen Roman Anthony, spending the rest of the year at Portland. He's 20 years old, like he's had such a quick ascent. Why rush him to AAA? He had, you know, uh, you know, some good stretches, some bad stretches at Portland. The Red Sox obviously like to look at the underlying numbers and hard hit percentage and all that. That's why he made it from Salem to Greenville last year without producing great numbers at Salem, is because he was hitting the ball so hard. So he's had some of the most the biggest exit velocities, the hardest exit velocities of home runs of anybody in the organization. But he could, why rush him? So, and then Kyle Teal. I mean, look at a guy like Austin Wells, who's, in the rookie of the year voting. Um, and I think he's like third best odds for the Yankees here. He's a guy that was he was drafted in the first round out of the University of Arizona. So he was the first round draft pick, just like Teal. And he spent three, full years in the minor leagues. There's really no rush I mean, catchers have so much on them, with the demand of just, catching a pitching staff, but also trying to improve, you know, your areas of your game behind the plate. And I mean, Jason Varitek never played over 100 games in a season. I know this is going way back now, but the first rounder never played over 100 games in a season until he was 27. So, Teal's 22. I didn't see the reason to. I thought, like, actually, I thought if anyone got promoted first, it was going to be Campbell, and also Meyer. Meyer's obviously been in the system 1 year more than Anthony, and 2 more years than Teal. And so I thought those two guys. But there's a comfort factor with, and there's also a leadership factor too. Like they want them to get comfortable with each other. We've heard so much about Jaron Duran, right? Like being the leader when some of these guys come up. But, all of these guys have leadership qualities. Marcelo is bilingual. He is, from day one that they drafted him, they've talked about him being a leader. Anthony seems like the most outspoken of all of them, and a guy that can be a leader. He might be the best leader of them all eventually. And Teal, being that catcher, I mean, we've seen with you know Adley Rutschman, certain guys like that your catcher can be obviously be an important part of, leadership. And so, moving them all together, comfort level and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't extremely surprised, but I was a little surprised that they all got moved together just because, they could have probably taken more time in AAA, a couple of them.
Yeah, it just seems like they value, when I say they, I mean the Red Sox front office and baseball ops people and player development seem to value the bond that the three of them have formed off the field. It starts, maybe in the instructional league or Arizona Fall League, or when they're taking part in the rookie development program here in the winter. They do seem to have become this sort of three amigos where they hang out off the field, have dinner together, socialize together. And I think it's interesting that the Red Sox put some priority on keeping them together as they all move up the chain here.
Definitely. And yeah, and they're all very similar, similar types of hitters too, and that they have, impressive walk percentages. They're very selective. They all kind of remind me in a way of Tristan Casas, like the approach, like selecting a pitch in a certain zone and really having the great eye. And so three really good players. Also though, like, Marcelo, I have concerns with him about injuries, and we could get to that, but like, I mean, this is 2 years in a row. I think he was limited to 78 games or something like that last year because of a shoulder injury. This year now he's got, the back inflammation, glute issue, lower back, and so like as pec issue. And so like, I think like Will Middlebrooks mentioned this on a recent podcast, was like, yeah, is there concern with injuries with him? Uh, that could be concerning going forward. So, but yeah, they get along really well. You could see kind of the chemistry when they came out. Did the when they were the first day in Portland, they came out to the whatever lounge it was, and the club at Worcester at Polo Park, and the D whatever it is. Anyway, they came out, and you could see that they get along, and they get along well, and they know a lot about each other. When they were asked to talk about each other's game, they went at great length to
Yeah.
talk about each other's game. So they know each other. They are tight on and off the field. They push each other on the field. They've talked about that, like Teal, saying like, who's gonna have a better day today or whatever. And so like, they push each other. So yeah, it was significant that all three of them got promoted, on the same day at the same time.
So we have Meyer sidelined for now with the lower back, hip, glute issue, whatever it is. He hasn't had a AAA at bat so far. Teal and Anthony have at opposite ends of the spectrum. Anthony's had, as you said, a number of multi-hit games. He's got a 977 OPS in his first 8 games there. Teal has struggled 3 for 27. What do we read into the early performances of both?
I think that you can't read too much into it. Taylor, look, you're looking at guys now, they're going to AAA. As I said, there's a lot on Teal's plate, like he's got a new staff to learn and all that. And I can see why he's, struggled a little bit, or struggled a lot, obviously, offensively. But you look at it and you go to AAA and you don't face in double A many guys that are coming right up and down from the major leagues. Um, you know, Anthony's home run the other day, his first home run in AAA was, 108 miles per hour off the bat, 415 feet against Bruce Zimmerman, who's, pitched for the Orioles, from 2020 to 2023. He's made 30 something appearances in 23 starts or like that. So, I mean, you're going to see more of those guys that know how to pitch, right? Like that are going up and down from the major leagues. And so that's an adjustment right there. Um, I mean, like as I said, with Roman Anthony's, his underlying numbers are so good and everything, like, hard hit balls and all that. Um, I know I had him number one prospect in the system at the beginning of the year, and yeah, I still consider him the number one prospect. He's just really good. And so I'm not too surprised. Like, I mean, could Teal have more, hits and stuff? Yeah, but he's taking some walks and stuff, and we'll see. I think there's just more on his plate, and it's very difficult to judge by such a small sample size. Obviously, we've seen that before with, guys in AAA and in the majors, obviously.
So the minute one leapfrog is made from Portland to Worcester, it's logical to expect that people are going to now take a look at how close these guys are to the big league team, both metaphorically and physically. They're 45 miles away now from the big leagues. And in the case of one or two, it could be a foul tip or a minor injury with somebody that opens the door for them to get to the big leagues. I think the expectation is, because this latest promotion took place so late in the minor league season into August, that we probably will not see any of them make their major league debut, even when rosters expand in September. Unless you disagree with that. Do you see a shot where we could probably rule out Meyer because he's not ready to play yet? They want him to get some at-bats and playing time there. But of the other two, is there any possibility in your mind that they could make their debut in Boston before the end of this season?
There's much value they put on catching defensive, defense on catching, that like I think that if one of those two guys like Wong or Jansen got hurt at this point, they'd take, Tyler Heineman off the 40 man and they put Reese McGuire on the 40 man. Reese McGuire would be back in the majors over all those guys, and so they need experience and a guy that's, caught that staff. So if anyone catcher wise is coming up, it's not going to be Teal. It's going to be, McGuire. In terms of Anthony, they have obviously they're very left-handed hitting heavy in the outfield. And so like, I mean, if he just goes off, maybe he's a September call-up. I just don't really see it at this point. Um, the one that I do see maybe is just, Christian Campbell. Like you look at this guy, he is a couple years older. He was just promoted to Worcester. Baseball America ranks him number 5 in the system now. He didn't start at all on their top 30 to begin the year. He was 25 on ours, but but yeah, I mean, you look at him and that they could maybe use some middle infield help down the stretch. The guy what better when better to promote a guy like to the majors too when he's extremely confident, right? Like, and he's hitting like crazy
Yep.
in the minors. I mean, that works for a lot of people. We saw like Will Middlebrooks, like in 2012, he was extremely hot at Worcester, or Pawtucket at that time,
Right.
and he comes up and he just, that's what he just kept going, at Boston, and so, the way that he's hit the ball this year. I mean, the confidence that he has to have, I mean, of anybody, like, I mean, the over 1,000 OPS, he's the thing with him too, which is so impressive with Christian Campbell is that they wanted him to trade some contact. He was known for his elite contact skills. They wanted him to trade some of that contact for power this year in his first full season. They drafted him in the 4th round in 2023 out of Georgia Tech, and he was just known as kind of a contact hitter, lacking a little bit in power. He's got a big body, though. He kind of looks like a guy that's like the same size as like a Xander Bogaerts. And obviously they wanted Bogaerts to hit for more power. And so they tell him to trade some, strikeout rate, for some power. Well, I think he's got a 570 slugging percentage this year. He's hitting for power, extra base power, 16 home runs, 31 doubles, and that came with more strikeouts at Greenville to start the year. I think his strikeout rate was 25% at Greenville. However, when he went to Portland, the contact and the power was both there. Like the strikeouts dropped dramatically. He was only striking out like 15% of the time at Portland. So, I mean, this is a guy that you've got to put him in the discussion with the big three, if not leaping over some of those guys.
And where do you see him fitting in down the road? If he were to come up in September as an extra guy who can move around and give them a strong bat off the bench. That would be sort of a cameo thing. But long term, as someone who's played both the outfield and infield, and given where they have long term commitments around the diamond, where does Campbell best fit into the future?
I guess that's also what, has to do with what Meyer becomes too as a shortstop. Campbell might end up at second. I know that the concerns with him defensively coming out of college was the arm strength. And I don't know how he's improved it because I haven't talked to him about it, but from what I've heard, he's significantly improved arm strength, and that's important at the two positions that he's played the most this year, which is shortstop and center field. And so they actually look at him as a good defender at two premium positions. And we'll see. I mean, like Roman Anthony, where's he going to play? Right field or center field. Abreu in the mix and all that. And going forward, we're talking about potentially second base, third base. Well, obviously Devers is there, but if you were to eventually move Devers to DH down the road, so I mean, from what I hear, he can play shortstop, and center field. I mean, I haven't really seen him play much this year, just highlights and stuff. Obviously, I'm not watching his games like consistently, but I've heard that he's made vast improvements defensively, and that the impact and just the small resume that he had. He was only, he was a redshirt at Georgia Tech his freshman year. And so he only played his sophomore year. He only played one season in college. Those were the reasons that he slipped from being a first rounder to a fourth rounder. But the defense, they found positions for him, obviously. And, I don't know. I mean, you've got to also factor in too that they've got a lot of names middle infielder wise, like Trevor Story. You would hope that, when he's under control for a while, that he comes back and stays healthy for
Yeah, I
these
mean
years.
there's a lot
On
of options
Grissom,
in the middle of the infield.
on
Rafaela,
Grissom,
Story,
yeah.
Meyer, Grissom, uh, Hamilton,
I think
Campbell.
Rafaela is, better. Like, I mean, obviously he's had a good week at shortstop. And coming out in the minor leagues, the big take on him was like he can be a gold glove center fielder right out of the gate in the majors, but he can be an above average shortstop, but he still needs to improve. And we've seen that this year. I mean, it's difficult to go from two positions, but
Yeah, and I
long
thought Alex Cora kind of addressed that yesterday, saying that for the most part he was going to stick in the infield the rest of the way
yeah.
because they think he's been negatively impacted by having to play two challenging middle of the diamond positions and go back and forth. It's hard to get a rhythm for either one. Let's talk about
Long term, I would look at him as center field.
yeah,
But I mean, I don't know. I
yeah,
mean, there's
I
just so
think
many
that's his
options.
best right now. That's his best position. I think he's a better center fielder than shortstop. And given Meyer and Story, it just seems like that makes the most sense to have him uh, mostly limited to the outfield. Let's talk about a couple of new names to the system. Braden Montgomery, the talented college outfielder, the number one pick. He's got the ankle injury. He is not going to play at all this year. And the second pick, Peyton Tolley, the big left-hander, as I understand it, he is in Fort Myers, but the decision seems to be not to have him in any organized games, whether it be the complex league or even the bottom of the system. They're going to hold him out and bring him along slowly. What can you tell us about where each is physically and what's down the road?
Yeah, so it's totally they're not going to pitch him this year because of innings. And with Braden, he won't make his debut till next year because of the physical things that went on in college. What was it again? It was an Achilles tear.
I thought it was a broken ankle, but
Oh, broken ankle. Why am I
yeah,
thinking David Hamilton had the Achilles
right,
tear? Never
right.
mind. Yeah, never mind. Yeah. So with him, like he's just so impressive. He's already ranked on Baseball America the fourth best prospect in the Red Sox system, and I think the 65th best prospect in baseball.
Hmm.
Um, another guy, like when you talk about, they've just got a lot of, guys, outfielders and, middle infielders. But with him as an outfielder, I mean, like a guy that can switch hit, he's better from the left side, but he can switch hit. And, he's, got plus raw potential power, and just another guy that can work counts. I'm like thinking in my mind today, actually, like, the lineup that could be of the future where you've got a lot of guys that are old school, like grind it out at bats, and we could be sitting through a lot of long games. But it's just that's the kind of guy they wanted to get, guys that, even guys that strike out a lot. Like, like they wanted to get guys that if they strike out a lot, they're still going to work a ton of walks. And they've filled the system with them totally. Um, obviously guy that, he's huge. He's what, 6'6" or something like
Yep.
that. He's got the prototypical body of a pitcher. And I think he's already ranked in the top 10 in the system. I'm not sure, maybe just outside. But like, impressive. Like we talk about, you know, adding velocity with a lot of these guys. And, he has been in the lower to mid 90s. He could add some velocity. I mean, there's so many programs now with weighted balls, but pitchers will just say getting into the weight room when you're a when you're after college, after you're an amateur, just putting on weight makes you a better throw harder. And so I'm really excited to see him next year. He's yeah, I mean they needed pitching. Everybody in this draft that they identified is going to be interesting because of Breslow, right? Like,
Right.
in their pitching infrastructure that they put together.
Um, to wrap up, it's sort of been a lost year for the higher end starting pitching prospects that were already in the system. I'm not counting somebody like Tully, who was just added, but guys like Wickelman Gonzalez has had a very disappointing season. And of course, Luis Perales out with Tommy John out until at least the middle of next year. How damaging is that for the pitching program and development that they're trying to get, where your top two guys, one is missing most of the year and the other is having a tough time of it?
Yeah, well, I think that it's extremely, deflating because we look at like, and Jeff Passan, like, made a point about their system at the beginning of last offseason, about how they have, it's very much like Baltimore position wise, like not play,
Right.
not pitcher wise. They have some dudes, he said, in their organization, but they're position players, and that continues to be the trend here. Um, it's concerning. Like, Gonzalez, obviously, you can do nothing about Perales. I guess you assume nowadays that young pitchers that throw hard are going to get hurt and that you have to get over that hump. And, but Gonzalez was always kind of a wild card to me. Like he reminds me kind of like a Darwinson Hernandez, who has extremely good stuff, throws hard, but where is it going?
Yeah.
Like walks like that. Like, I mean, the most important thing when you come up to the majors is being able to command the baseball, and he just doesn't have it still. With the walk rate is still like 5 or 6 or something like that. It's extremely concerning they haven't figured that out, and he's dramatically dipped in the prospect rankings after he was their minor league pitcher of the year last year.
Right.
And so, but I think that there's other guys that have taken a step forward. Um, you know, Obviously a guy that I wrote about yesterday. I've always thought about him like, Cutter Crawford. I was high on Cutter Crawford in the minors. I thought Cutter Crawford was going to be a decent, starting pitcher eventually in the major leagues. Um, and I remember asking Chris Sale about him the year that he was, drafted, or the year after, whatever it was. But like I look at like Hunter Dobbins, who I wrote about yesterday, as a guy that's, like steadily making his way through the system, kind of under the radar, 20th prospect in the system. He maintains 95 to upper 90s velocity throughout starts now, and he's been going like 6 innings, like each start. He was just promoted to Worcester yesterday. I think after I wrote about him last year, and when he was well, I know I wrote about him last year after I wrote about him in Greenville. I think he was promoted within a week. So if I write about him again at Worcester, he'll probably be promoted within a week, depending on that trend. But really, though, with him, like the velocity is there, the secondary pitches. Everybody you ask now in the Red Sox system, like, what's your pitch mix? Like everybody's adding a sweeper, so he's added a sweeper. He looks like there's guys like that. That impress me that are kind of under the radar that are having really good years, and he's got really good command too. As I said, that's an important thing, going forward. So, I look at him as a guy that, and I'm just gonna scroll right down and look at some pictures. I mean, David Sandlin, who they got from the Kansas City
Right.
Royals in
The
the
Schreiber trade.
fiber deal. The results haven't been there. A lot of times when you look at results, I mean, forgetting the pitcher was in the Houston system, they told him to just go out and throw a pitch basically the entire year to develop it in the minors. And then everybody's like, why does he have a 5 ERA? He's supposed to be this top prospect. And he comes up to the majors and he was good. And so, like, so they're telling them to do different things, right? Like, that's not all about results. He's throwing the hard. He's not getting results. We'll see, with pitch mix and stuff like that. He's still, he's considered high up there, in the rankings. A top 10 Red Sox prospect. Richard Fitz is another guy. He's made some adjustments recently. He's the guy they got in the Alex Verdugo trade. And so they've got a lot of interesting guys here. But there should be a concern that they still haven't, developed. They have developed some guys, obviously, Hauk
Right.
and Cutter Crawford and Brian Bayo, who are all in the rotation. But there's no guy right there that you can say, wow, that guy's going to be, a major league starter within the next year or two, and he's definitely going to join the rotation. And that should be a concern. As I said, a lot of guys are adding sweepers, a lot of guys are changing pitch mixes, and so like they are working, obviously.
Yeah, and more work needs to be done, obviously, because there, as you point out, particularly at the mid and upper levels, there aren't a lot of starting pitching options that you can pencil into that rotation for 25 and going forward. All right, well, we touched on a bunch of stuff here today with Chris. My thanks to you for your expertise on the Red Sox minor league system. We will be doing
My
this.
expertise, though, my expertise of Montgomery having an Achilles injury. That was
Listen, there's a lot of injuries to keep track of, so understood. But we will check in, of course, with you periodically throughout the off season, get some minor league updates. A reminder that Chris's minor league notebook runs every week, and another way to stay up to date on breaking news, both at the major league level and at the minor league level, is, of course, to subscribe to the Red Sox Insider Text program. To do that, text the word join to 617-751-6257, then click on the link to subscribe. That'll get you a free 14-day trial period. After that, it's $4.99 a month. Our thanks again to Chris Smith for filling in this week for us. We'll be back with Chris throughout the off season, and Chris Cotillo will join me at least briefly for one episode next week. We've got some other shows planned. Stay with us. Thanks for now.